welcome everybody to Abode Academy 2. Just with a show of hands or a wave, how many of you attended Abode Academy 1? Okay, so it looks like we got quite a few returning folks, and again, welcome. Thank you so much. And this Abode Academy 2 is an important one, and it's going to help us get our acts together, I hope, and in preparation for what's to come. As a hospice nurse, I often walk into people's homes and they've not planned anything. And that is not the time to plan. That is not the time to try and get it together, because there's so many other things just looming. And so me and our hospice team, that's kind of our job then, to try and help get things done, during that time. So I'm glad you're all here and hope this will spark some of us to get it done. So if you've not attended, we try to keep our discussions towards the end and your questions towards the end. You will have at the bottom of your screens, if you touch the bottom, a little bar will appear, and in the center of that is a chat. And if you click the chat, you're going to be able to type some questions. So if you have a question or a comment, go ahead and put that in. And then at the end, I'll kind of go through them, and we'll go through with our speaker and answer some of those questions and do a little more discussion there towards the end. If you need to leave at any time, that's fine. We understand. And just know at the very end, I'm going to kind of talk about the next Abode Academy next week, and remind you that we're going to have a survey that will come out in your email tomorrow. And if you would please fill that out, that is most helpful to us in getting feedback for our speakers. And the more important question is, what would you like to hear in the future? Because Abode Academy 3 is already started in discussion. So we're real excited about that as well. So anything else, Mary, you can think of before I get the ball rolling?
I can go through and mute everyone. So we like to do that just to keep the background quiet so we can hear Ynyra. But you can always raise your hand or wave. And I think, Ynyra, you're wanting to have a little bit of interaction, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll keep
Yes.
an eye out. But in general, let's keep ourselves on mute if we're not speaking.
Yeah, that keeps the dogs from barking and children from crying and the pizza guy from ringing the doorbell. Okay, so I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight. Her name is Ynyra O'Shea, and tonight's talk is called A Good Death. Let's talk about it. Let me tell a little bit about Ynyra. She put a quote that says, "Inspiring authenticity to what is present in the moment with resiliency and deeper connection to the sacred web of life." She is a certified sacred passage end-of-life doula who provides spiritual, emotional, and physical support for dying people and their caregivers. Her life's work and extensive training in multiple disciplines prepares her to bring a heart-centered counsel to communities, to families, and individuals facing loss. Ynyra has served communities worldwide, celebrating both life and death, marking life's transitions through the sacred rites of passage. Ynyra's vast international experience brings a perspective which is unique to this movement. And she's earned the following: a Sacred Passage End-of-Life Doula, professional certification through Conscious Dying Institute in Boulder, Colorado, Bachelor of Arts degree in social psychology with a focus on ethnobotany and world religions, extensive study in the sacred arts through practices of contemplative meditation, prayer, dance, and ritual, active member of the Order of the Good Death, advocate with the Death Positive Movement to help transform our perspective on all matters of death into a positive and vibrant way of life. And she's also working with us and looking at possibly doing some doula work here at Abode. So she's a vast expert and a wonderful resource for us. And we are so happy to have you here with us tonight. Ynyra, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be part of the ABODE Academy and to be a volunteer with ABODE. I'm just so deeply appreciative to be affiliated with a deep sense of reverence, care, and centered around a contemplative practice. Overall, a very inclusive and warm environment, and it's a centerpiece of my life right now. So thank you, ABODE. As is the tradition with ABODE, I'd like to begin with a contemplative meditation for us all. So just taking a few deep breaths and just settling. There's nothing to do but just settle. Just scanning the sensations of our bodies, feeling ourselves sit in this chair. And just arriving into the precious presence of now. I'd like to guide us in a little meditation. With our eyes turned inward, feeling our breathing coming in and out. I would like to share the words of Yogananda about peace. I am in the temple of quietness. Peace fills my body, peace fills my heart, and dwells within my love. Peace within, without, everywhere. Infinite peace surrounds my life and permeates all the moments of my existence. Peace unto myself, peace unto my family, peace unto my nation, peace unto my world, peace unto my cosmos. O Spirit, teach me to find thy presence on the altar of my consistent peace and in the joy that springs from deep meditation. So tonight's subject is about making our plan, beginning with the end in mind. And, you know, many people, the common reason why people do not have their end of life plan is that they simply just put it off. They have a lot of excuses. They're busy, they're too young, it's not going to happen to me. I'm just going to get around to it. And I want to press upon this evening's gathering an intention and an inspiration to get our plans done. I would like to inspire this evening each of us to make a 30-day plan and commitment to get our own plans done, especially as professionals. Because as professionals, we can inspire and instruct other people to also get their plans done, just our peers, our own families. And making a 30-day goal sort of helps get the job done. In this talk tonight, I just want to speak about the elements of what it looks like to make your plan. And I also want to talk about the aspects of breaking that fear barrier to having the conversation that's necessary in order to help deepen what it is that matters to us and what matters to our loved ones when we make this plan. Their inclusion makes the process a lot more fun, a lot more meaningful, and when completed, actually gives great peace of mind. So speaking of peace of mind, I'd like to just ask a couple questions and just see how it sits with you. You know, I presume that you would want for yourself and for your loved ones to die with dignity and grace. Is that true? What does it mean for you to die with dignity and grace? What does it mean for your loved ones when you are caring for them to die with dignity and grace? And what does it mean, perhaps if you're a professional in this field, for your patient to die well in your care? What does that mean for you? It's hard to imagine achieving a peaceful and dignified death if you do not have a plan. Essentially, no plan equals more suffering. There's no way around it. And I think that as a culture, we tend to avoid what is fearful and painful, and it's so understandable. We're humans. We don't want to be exposed to a sense of that pain. And pain is around death is raw and monumental and powerful, breathtaking. It's like nothing else. But there is an invitation that I'd like to explore with you tonight, where certain techniques, certain allies could help us face that fear within ourselves and within the family as we broach the conversation. And so a little bit later on in this talk, I want to talk about some of those methods of how to approach a conversation with greater ease and success, so that we can get our plans together and you know, distribute the necessary tasks that we want to ask of our family, our friends, our community. No one really dies alone. We need a community that surrounds us, that helps us get through this time. My daughter said once, you can't plan your wedding on your wedding day. And I just love the image of that. You know, there's a sense that, you know, it always seems too soon until it's too late. You cannot plan your dying when you're on your deathbed. It's simply not as enjoyable. It's not as satisfying, and it's not nearly as successful. It's not that it's not impossible. You can, you know, suddenly you're there. And fortunately, like Beverly said, there are people who are skilled to help you elicit what's important to you. But I'm after and interested and curious about how to make this process satisfying, life-affirming, joyful. In the midst of something that we avoid, there is something very precious and beautiful in the process as we contemplate our own mortality and that of our loved ones. So, what does it mean about advanced directives? Tonight, I'm just going to give an overall broad view, because in the next subsequent teachings, there will be masters and experts on this that will really dig into the heart and meat of this substance. But tonight, just a brief overview. Advanced directives are important in that crossroads between the point, God forbid, that we encounter a situation either through long-term illness or sudden accident, or a point where we become incapacitated and we're no longer able to speak for ourselves. Part of the planning process is to find an advocate, someone who will speak on our behalf, someone who knows what our wishes are, and someone who is skilled in being able to interface between us and the doctor, the medical team, someone who knows a little bit about medical savvy, so because they have access to all of your medical records. HIPAA makes this allowance for your health proxy so that they know what is in your best interest and can make decisions on your best interest on your behalf. Any person who is age 18 or over is encouraged to get a healthcare proxy. Under the age of 18, you have your parents to speak on your behalf. But beyond that, it is important to find an individual to speak for you. It can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be someone from your congregation, it can be someone in your art class, it can be anyone you feel is, a good ally to you. And this person can change, especially if you're starting young in your life. There's certain, decades and monumental structures of your life where you might want to change and update and refine. But at this point in time, it's important to have documents that indicate who is your proxy and who will speak for you. And even more importantly, once you have these files, make sure that they're not just hidden away in a file box in the back of the closet with all the sports shoes on top of it. Like everyone who is going to be part of your team needs copies of these forms. I have heard stories where in one case, a medical doctor had demanded that the wife whose husband had been injured in an accident had to drive 50 miles back home to get their advanced directive and their medical proxy and come back to the hospital in order to speak on behalf of her husband. So it's advantageous to have copies in your glove compartment, maybe in your wallet, a laminated, to call list, the major information, get that to your loved ones. I want to just speak and highlight this radical period in our lives when we're in the midst of a global pandemic. And when I think about that, I think about the vulnerability that any one of us can succumb to this and within a month can die from this. And I'm sensitive to the idea of people, adults who have young children. I'm impassioned to advocate for people who have children to complete their forms, so that children know where they're going to go, so that families know what the plan is for children. If the adults become sick, and in some cases become very sick and may not die, but they are not able to care for their children, get that lined up. Let's think about what the plan would be. I also think that it's important to make sure that you have all of your passwords, your phone numbers, of important contacts. Get a digital proxy, someone who actually is skillful on the internet, who can communicate with all of your your friends on your Facebook, all of your electronic devices, all of your communication digital networks. You need someone who is savvy to be able to communicate with everybody. So bear that in mind. Think about someone who could be your digital proxy. In your living will, that is a place where you can speak about your last wishes or how you would like to be, how you would like your end to be sanctified and how you would like to experience your end. It's very clear that most people statistically want to die at home. They want to be surrounded by their loved ones and they want to be comfortable. I think one of the greatest fears around dying is actually the pain of dying and the unknown. And I think that if you do not choose and make your plan, that sense of your own agency, the sense of the meaning of your own choices will be sacrificed if you don't make this plan. And doctors will just simply choose for you. If there is no one listed on your behalf to speak for you, doctors out of necessity will just pick someone to just be your person. And often that will take you into saving your life at all cost. And that is something that in the conversation you have with your family is something that you would like to think about. Is that where you want to end up? With tubes and wires and being in an institution, and particularly in COVID, where perhaps you may sacrifice being with your loved ones and your loved ones being near you. So these are big questions. But we can no longer avoid thinking and talking about it, dreaming about it. It's a time to allow the fear and to be there present, but let's talk to fear. Let's put fear in the chair across from us and let's talk directly with our fear. Let's face our fear about our own mortality, about the mortality of our loved ones, so that we can make this plan and we can get clear about what we all want and share this information. And then there is a deep relief. Because the last thing we want to do, I think, is create extra suffering and layers of suffering for our children, for our loved ones, for our family, for our spouse, for our parents. If we were to go without a plan, with no plan equals greater suffering, particularly in the sense that when people are in shock, in grief, it's hard to access thinking and the prefrontal cortex in order to make these very difficult conversations and decisions, and a series of things that need to be decided upon. I've experienced that within my own family recently, losing a member of my family. And my person did not have a plan. And it caused a lot of extra anguish and a kind of distraction from the natural ability to simply just grieve. I think if I had had that opportunity to just grieve the shock of my loved one's passing, I would have been able to just naturally go through a process that although intense, flows in a way that opens the heart, is compassionate, and leaves a living legacy for the rest of the family, that, oh, my loved one died in peace and we were at peace. Having a plan gives a sense of stability to the deep emotions that naturally occur when one is faced in this situation. I would like to just interject and stop. It would be meaningful to me to just get some feedback. If there's one volunteer here who could raise their hand and and just give back a little feedback of what you've heard so far, or what is meaning, or what strikes your interest so far. Susan, are you wanting to speak?
I think it's very interesting and kind of scary to think that if I don't do this myself and don't designate someone to do this for me, that, you know, if I were in the hospital incapacitated, you know, they will decide for me, you know, or heaven forbid they choose the wrong one and that person doesn't know what I would want. You know, it's very sobering.
I like that from Kim. It is a simple process. You can go online, Google advanced directives and the state of where you're living, and download the information, fill out the file. Each state is unique in that whether or not you need a notary, often it's just 2 witnesses, it's state dependent. But it's a fairly inexpensive, it's free, essentially. Now, I'm not, of course, there's more complications around, you know, estate planning and all of that. That part is for future teachings. But right now, what I'm honing in on is just this quality of the point in which you're still alive and you're not able to speak of how you want this to go down for yourself. Like, you want someone to help speak for you. And you're right, that can be scary when your own choice is compromised. It's so simple to me. It's like, here, while we're alive, no matter what age, we can be vibrant, healthy. You know, this is the time to just get this plan and designate your important people and get it notarized, get the documents shared with important people. And now there's peace of mind. And when you're traveling, or when you get married or divorced, or you adopt a child or have a child, like these threshold moments, those are periods of time when you want to refine. And, you know, it's a living document. It's a living process. It's always refined. It's not like you just do this once and forget about it. It's always kind of with you, you know, stick it in your freezer, stick it someplace where it's important, but always bear it in mind. And it comes to a deeper conversation then about the meaning of sharing conversations, and how do we make it easier for ourselves to talk with people so that they're part of the plan, you know, and we ourselves support our family making the plan for them. And, you know, that it's, I'm interested in creating a movement, you know, I'm impassioned about a culture that just takes it for does not take, you know, our life so for granted that we don't think about death, that it just happens to somebody else. You know, I love what Ram Dass says, that you wear death on your left shoulder and life on your right, that death informs your living in every moment. And when we can approach our dying and our mortality in this gracious and dignified place, I think it activates a desire to live our purpose with more meaning, with more substance, with more, with a greater sense of offering service. I loved when Peg Armstrong spoke in Academy 1. She described her experience of going and staying with Mother Teresa. And she witnessed Mother Teresa spending about 10 to 15 minutes with each person. And she described Mother Teresa sitting next to this person, holding their hand and just smiling and nodding yes. She said no words. And I was captivated by that imagery, that sense of presence. There's something about defining what does presence mean when we're engaging in ourselves, when we're questioning ourselves about our own uncoiling and how we want our end to be, and how we share that conversation with our loved ones in our community. That quality of presence, of showing up and being there, being a witness, being a support, being deeply curious about what is really meaningful to you, what matters to you. Like these questions that I want to ask you are not about just getting information or having a dialogue, but it's about really, I'm curious about what's in the heart of your own existence. How do you perceive your life? What matters to you? And that leads us to the conversation of how it is that you want your end, to be experienced. There's something incredibly beautiful about this last developmental stage of our lives that I don't want to miss out on because I'm flipping out about the plans that I didn't do when I could have. Then it's too late. It's too late to enjoy the process, So I go back to this quality of presence. When we're showing up with people and our families that don't want to talk about it, there's aversion, or people are angry, or people have a lot of intense emotion, it can be very scary to talk and engage in this conversation about our dying. Avoidance is no longer acceptable. If we want to change our systems and our culture around embracing dying, we can no longer avoid it. And that's why I want to invite death and invite fear into the chairs of in our living rooms and talk directly to that within us. Let's face that within our own selves and show compassion, show love, show tenderness, show acceptance to fear. Like, I love Thich Nhat Hanh. He's like, hello, fear, talk to me. What do you want to say? Why are you here? Why are you afraid? There's a tenderness that I think we need to find within our own selves and our own fear. So that when it comes to showing up and being present for our patients, for our colleagues, for our family, we have a greater durability. We've exercised the heart muscles in a way that we've expanded to hold whatever is occurring in front of us just as it is, with no demand to change it. If people are angry or scared or afraid, we can just sit with that as a witness. With that sense of loving presence and acceptance with everything just as it is. No one needs to change. And breathing through that, that is a possible way to be with ourselves and how we serve our family, our community, our nation, the world. And that's how we spread this movement. I think about other cultures who are not afraid of death and dying, and they inspire me. One culture in particular, the Dogra of Burkina Faso. I know that culture well. I have a good friend who is Burkinese, and he is from the Dogra people. And there's also, of course, two well-known authors, Sobonnefu Somé and Melodoma Somé, who are both Dogra. My friend Baby, he speaks about dying because dying occurs all the time in their village. It's just an acceptable part of their life, and their rituals around dying are so encompassing. Funerals last for a week. There's an immense amount of ritual that goes within the dying process. No one is ever left alone. The community comes in and embraces. Everything stops in the village, and everyone is part of this funeral, supporting the concentric circles of those grieving to the most intimates around the one who has been lost. What is so extraordinary about the Dogra is that they have an ongoing cyclical relationship with those who die, now become ancestors, and the ancestors are an integral part of their lives, day-to-day lives. There's never a sense of like some mystery of where do you go, do you disappear? And no wonder here in this culture we're so bewildered. Where is our loved one? How do we access them? There's something about the exempling of the Dogra where their people become ancestors, and they have this direct relationship. They feed food to their ancestors. The same with the Lakota. It's very similar. They feed their ancestors. Every time they have a meal, the Lakota take little bits of each part of their food, put it on a little plate, and offer it to the spirits. They offer the food and feed their ancestors. I would love to envision us doing that for our loved ones who go on from here, you know, that there's a sense of ongoing connection. And I bring that up because there's something about when we have this conversation with our loved one, it isn't like just talking about our doom, this dark and gloomy place, but in fact, there's this extraordinary developmental stage that opens the heart, that cries for inclusivity and love and acceptance, a sense of really healing the matters of the heart and the soul. The conditions that have caused us pain, we can release them now. There's a sense of holding that presence that can help us release that which has burdened us and which have burdened, you know, a conflict within our family. And here's the opportunity. And I hear this so many times with people who have made plans and family who have come together, where siblings have healed their rivalries because they've realized this was also superficial. And why did we waste our time on this? Here, this loved one is dying before us, and it is the most healing balm. The potential for that is incredible. If we show up, if we do not avoid the fear and the pain, and we really come into it with that sense of compassion, allows us to open our hearts like nothing has ever done before. I think that's the beauty and the essence that I want from my loved ones. I want them to have their plans so I know how to speak for them. And they for me, so that I can actually experience what it feels like to be in the presence of a divine spirit and the mystical nature of my uncoiling. That's what I want for me, and I want for every one of you, and for our culture to heal. Stephen Jenkinson speaks about the power of dying well, and how that is the living legacy that we give to our children. When children can witness the natural evolution of a dying process and witness their loved one dying in peace and dignity, and everyone's, you know, has the plan and executes the plan, and, you know, and is done with beauty and grace, that is a living legacy. And we can do that by having a plan. My mentor and teacher, Taryn Estes from Conscious Dying Institute, created a beautiful mapping out called The Best 3 Months. And this best 3 months plan is essentially for maybe someone who has a diagnosis and perhaps has, 3 months left to live. It's a sort of a container. Of course, it doesn't mean it's just relative to 3 months, but it gives a container of time that asks these poignant questions. That's sort of subtexts between these major thresholds of advanced directives that are a necessity to communicate with the medical world, with the legal world, and so forth, so that your intentions can be, can be communicated. But there's something more subtle on the emotional, the spiritual, the physical domains. Questions that are really open-ended and inquisitive, that helps get you to the real heart of, what do I really want? I think some people who have never experienced dying before really they really don't even know what their options are. Can you imagine, what would it be like? Can you imagine being on your deathbed? And I love I can't remember who said this. Maybe Beverly, you said, the deathbed is transformed into the death altar. It's a death temple. This is holy space. And asking, anyone who is healthy or has a diagnosis and has the luxury to plan, what would it be like to be on your death temple? What kind of music would you like to hear? Can you imagine, what would you like to see? Would you be like to be next to a window? Would you like to be outdoors in nature? Who would you like to have there with you, surrounding you, supporting you? Which hospice will your loved ones call to come in and take care of you and take care of your physical needs and help you with your pain? In the emotional level, what would you like to say to your loved ones? Here's an opportunity, a time that you could make a video that says something very special to your loved ones. Even if it's telling your funny jokes, that can be shared at your celebration of life. In the spiritual realm, questions can be asked like, how do you define your spirituality? Do you have a religious practice? Are there certain symbols that you would like in your death altar, to help guide you, to strengthen you?
Just 2 more minutes, Ynyra.
Thank you. I do hope that in some ways that I've inspired you to finish your own plan, especially if you're a professional in this field, to inspire others in your family and your community to also finish your plan, to know that as an American, as we value freedom and we value our agency, that our choice really matters, and that our choice can be executed if we share what our choices, what we want, and share those with those who are meaningful. Get your advanced directives. You can get them online, print them, and fill them out, and have them signed, and have them distributed in the most important places. And hopefully I've inspired you in some essence, to embrace and face your fears, face the sense of inhibition around having these conversations, by being tender with yourself, and then being tender with those around you who also display fear, because the fear will subside, and what will be revealed is the heart of what matters to all of us, our sense of connection, our sense of loving and inclusion, and our ultimate goal to die in peace and with dignity. Thank you so much for listening.
Oh, Ynyra, thank you. That was lovely. It was lovely. And we've got some questions that we'd like to go over, but thank you. We have Kim. She's asking, is it wise to have a backup person? For example, she says, my husband is my healthcare proxy. What would happen if we were both in a car accident and unable to speak for ourselves? So should we have a backup to the backup?
Absolutely. In fact, on these forms, there are usually 2 backup choices just in case. In fact, I'm sitting with my friend who did lose both of his parents suddenly in a car accident. And that is an example he shared with me, that his father had everything planned out. And in his shock and dismay, all he did was follow his father's directives. He had all of the information, and there were backup people who could have helped, but my friend was able to take care of all of it so that he can actually tend to his own grieving. Wow. That is a beautiful story of, when it's done right, that there's a healing balm in this time. And the suffering was minimized because his father had a plan.
Yeah, I like how you said it. It really helped in his grief.
Yes.
Grieving and having to do this, that's very difficult. Susan says, I have a physician's directive. Do I still need a proxy?
There are certain states and certain forms that you still need a proxy, yes. Even if it's a physician directed, often you cannot have your physician or medical team be your proxy. I don't know how that works in different states. And that's for, I think these kinds of specific questions would be best for the speakers who are upcoming, who have more knowledge about that, especially the legal realms. But
yeah, next week, that'll
yes.
be our speaker next week. Yeah. And then Nargis Pierre says, this is a great question. Since we're so insecure and inexperienced to talk about our death and dying, with all that's going on with COVID and so much more death around families and younger people, should we talk to young people as we are able? Should we be extra special careful, maybe even invite professionals to have that conversation from a wider perspective? Could teachers, for example, be allowed to talk about death in their classrooms, or is it rather taboo unless there's a community tragedy?
I love that question.
That's a great question, yeah.
I love that because it really breaks open this sense of what is taboo. Why is death a taboo when, in fact, as I described in the Dogma, children are growing up, learning that death is a natural part of day-to-day life. I envision that in this growing movement of doulas who are being educated and are now practicing and advocating for a death positive culture, that we develop programs where we're teaching children death language. We're teaching the language of emotions. So it's easier to talk about when we're contracted or when we're expanded, when something feels good or something doesn't feel good. When someone is dying, that a child is invited into the process and never separated from that.
And
there's this.
What was I say? What's even more poignant is every night on the news, we get the death count. What are these children thinking? If you watch the news, the COVID deaths today, we had 8 deaths today and a total of, this is in our conversations every day.
That is a beautiful thing, but I think within it, there's still a sense of avoidance.
Sure. Yeah.
We're talking about front end people. And I think children are exposed to television and people at 8 o'clock every night banging pots. I haven't heard that in a while in support of front end, but no one's talking about the back end. What is going on with funeral directors and the people who are involved with the back end and dealing with these bodies, and where is the dignity in that? Where that seems to be invisible. I used to work hours and hours, months on working with cadavers, And it was such a mystery. You never see that. Where do these cadavers come from? How do they appear? You never see them. No one talks about, the elements of death and the elements of what happens to our loved ones in COVID when there's no possibility of gathering for funerals. Everything is amiss. And I think that's why rituals, talking about, allies that help us with the grieving. Children are grieving. When they see these death counts, they are grieving, even if they're not bringing a voice to it. And it's I think our job as adults to help bring a voice to them, to get to their level and ask them, what does it feel like? Again, the presence that we hold for adults, we hold for children, even more importantly, because they're our future who brings back the healing that death is our natural gift to us. And if we can take these moments to share with them, the grace, the dignity, and how it is that they feel. If they feel scared, let's hold that with them. Let's be a witness. Let's give them the opportunity to feel that it's safe to feel whatever they feel, to help reflect back in reflective listening, active listening, presence, what it is that they are experiencing, and give legitimacy to their voice, to what they're saying. Let's answer their questions. The idea of just waiting for a professional to come in, that just really feels alienating to me. I'm not saying that professionals are needed. Yes, we need their guidance, but in sense of our direct relationship with children, let's naturalize this process and let's just get real and let's allow them the safety to feel whatever they are feeling and allow the human intelligence to move grief in its natural course.
What about a conversation starter? How do we get this conversation started? Like, maybe you want to sit down with mom or dad, how do we get
I
it?
love what Caitlin Dowdy said in one of her videos. It's like, make light of it, make a joke in a sense, or make it like, I just heard this news report that says, that you could be cremated using water. Imagine that. Mom, how would you like to go? There's also this element of just being radically honest. If you're afraid to bring up this conversation with your mom, just say, Mom, gosh, I'm so scared to bring up this conversation, but I know I really want to because I want to know what matters to you. And at a certain point, we're all going to die. And I want to know how you want to go about that. What would you want? I think just naming how we feel as a conversation starter
Like that.
is one point. But there's a quality about the conversation, again, that is not about dialoguing or just eliciting or just getting information. It's about what really matters to you. So the essence of the conversation, I think, requires or is an invitation of deep curiosity. And I think that curiosity will lead us towards this sense of presence that will be beneficial, that just helps the natural course of the conversation. And if someone is resistant, name the resistance. I see that there's resistance and that's okay. But I still want to talk about this. Maybe we can plan another time.
Mary said, my mom loved fashion, so I asked which of her beautiful outfits she would want to be buried in.
Oh, I
That's a great one.
loved that.
Yeah.
I love that. Exactly. That there's a lot of joy in the planning.
Yeah.
When given the time, in the best 3 months, it takes a while. It takes multiple interviews to really hone in and get and elicit imagine what you would like. I've heard all kinds of stories, being buried at sea, or, a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, one of my happy burial stories, actually funeral stories, is that she built a funeral pyre that we had up in the mountains, and we lit her up. And I cried. I never cried so hard watching my friend inflamed. I couldn't believe it. But after about an hour, it was like the most cathartic acceptance that she's gone. and then just tending to that. And she has this beautiful, sexy picture of herself while she was alive, you know, planning this on top of her funeral pyre. You know, she planned every detail. And that funeral was the most incredible. So
What a
when
gift.
given the opportunity, there's a lot of exciting options that you can consider, you know.
Well, I mean, just a great segue into what Beatrice is asking. She said, is there a particular resource you'd recommend to spur the best 3 months thoughts and meditations? A book or a website?
In terms of the best 3 months, contact Conscious Dying Institute. That is one of the life-changing programs, I must say, that I've experienced to help me no longer be afraid of dying, to actually embrace dying as an ally. And there's a lot of information around the best 3 months planning. And that is itself an entity, a program that Taryn Estes has created and designed. One book that I really love, and in fact is on the book list for the ABODE reading program, is Being with Dying by Roshi Joan Halifax. This book is amazing. Cultivating compassion and fearlessness in the presence of death. She has so much information, and she has a lot of Zoom talks. Watching Stephen Jenkinson, he's prolific. I can't remember the name of his movie, darn it. But there's a movie that he's in. This, you can look up Stephen Jenkinson, and he has a beautiful movie. Yes, Grief Walker. That's it. Thank you. And he has numerous talks that are so illuminating around the essence of what death asks of us. I love that question that he proposes.
Well, yeah, Ynyra, this was wonderful. And thank you for all this information and all that you shared with us tonight. I can't believe our hour is almost up. So a couple things. Ynyra did talk about the book, Being with Dying. And I just want to tell you all, that is our book that we're studying in our book club. And we just had our first book study last night. And if you would love to join us, we have room. And it's the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. And so our next one is in 2 weeks. I don't know what date that is. Mary can probably pop in and tell me. But you know, you are still welcome to join us. And next week is our second session of our ABODE Academy called A Good Death. It's all in the details. And this will be kind of go into what Ynyra was talking about tonight. We're going to talk about advanced planning, directive to physicians, you know, out of hospital, do not resuscitate orders, just kind of the legal side of all of this. So Carol Birch, she's an attorney in elder care. She's going to be our speaker, and that will start next Thursday night at 6:30. So tomorrow, just a reminder, you will all receive a survey about our program tonight. And I sure enjoyed this. This was lovely. As a hospice nurse, many times you've got 4 and 5 people in the room and nobody wants to talk. And I've had chaplains and social workers request not to return because, you know, they try to bring these topics up and people are afraid. So, you know, we need to get the word out, and we need to dispel this fear of dying and this fear of talking about it, because none of us are getting out of here alive, right? So thank you all so much. I appreciate that, you know, you're here with us and share these moments, and we'll see you next week.